I think there are two statements that we know are true. One is that our client base wants to make an impact with its wealth, and healthcare innovation is essential and central to the San Diego economy. Now, we have a fantastic speaker that melds those two concepts together. Anne Marbarger is the CEO of Curebound. Now, if you don't know what Curebound is, it's a great charity that raises money for advancing research into curing cancer in our lifetimes. Now, since launching Curebound, Anne has raised over $43 million in funding, partly through those fantastic concerts held at Petco Park, including the Elton John concert this May. I was at that concert. Who else was at Elton John? Yeah? Oh, yeah, let's have a round of applause for Elton John. Yeah? Great. So, fantastic, way of raising money. She's been recognized as was one of San Diego's 500 most influential leaders. She's been nominated as Director of the Year. She worked for Deloitte. She was tracking down terrorist financing when she worked at the US Treasury Department. She did an MBA at George Washington. She's a triathlete. She's a former D1 soccer player, obviously very relevant given the previous conversation. And my favorite fact about Anne is that she played professional soccer in Iceland, which was a new thing to me, right? Anyway, so look, Anne's going to speak for about 20 minutes, and then my colleague Troy Owens is going to come on the stage and facilitate a Q&A. Please welcome Anne Marbarger.
Earth angel, please be my darling dear.
Thank you so much, David. Good afternoon. I think if you look at this incredible lineup of speakers and companies and topics covered throughout this conference today, I think the easiest one to forget is the one that comes after Drew Brees. Such an incredible leader, an athlete, and a philanthropist. And so I'm going to keep my message simple. And I hope that there's one thing at the end of this discussion on fueling what matters, wealth with intention, that you take away. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to go back in time a little bit. When I was little, I wasn't throwing footballs in the backyard, but I was compulsive about soccer. Played other sports, but soccer was really what I loved. And any chance that I could get, I'd had a ball with me. When I was about 7 years old, my parents put me on a local rec team in our community in St. Louis, where I was the only girl on a boys' team. And there was a dad on our soccer team that every time I would score a goal, which was pretty consistently, he would stand up and yell, "Pretty good for a girl." And this is like 1990, so indoor soccer with like a slab of concrete with a little bit of AstroTurf put over it, so it's really loud, and his voice echoed. And everyone in the place could hear it. I could hear it on the field. My teammates could hear it. You're like, what does that mean? Pretty good for a girl. And so I transitioned eventually to playing club soccer. Our team went on to win state championships, regional championships. We went on to play in nationals. I went on to play in college. As David mentioned, that is a true fact. I did actually play one season overseas in Iceland. And so my point is, just like Drew, I learned at a very young age what my passion was. And I learned that even if there were people who didn't think you should or could do something, if you paid attention to your heart and what you really love to do, you could do things that were impossible. So that is a little bit switching gears, flash forward to why I'm here today. It's not to talk about sports, but it's actually to talk a little bit more about Curebound. And the only thing that I hope you take away from this session is that the next time you hear the words, "I've been diagnosed with cancer," or your friend or family member hears those words, that you think of the work that we're doing here in San Diego through Curebound. So on average, every two people in the United States are diagnosed with cancer during the 40-second play clock in an NFL. That's 5,200 people a day. It's 1 out of 3 people are going to be diagnosed with cancer. And that can feel pretty overwhelming and impossible. But what Curebound sees when we look out on the San Diego community is unmatched world-class research institutions, 6 of them here, right here in our community. We've got incredible health systems. We've got this growing and exceptional biotech community that's working right around these research institutions, spinning out many of the companies that are being funded by some of the investors that are here today. So we look out and we see that through collaborative research, what's happening in San Diego, if you layer in wealth with intention and artificial intelligence, we actually believe that we can cure cancer in our lifetime. So what is Curebound? We're a San Diego-based 501c3 that raises and invests philanthropic capital primarily in 6 research institutions based here in San Diego. As David mentioned earlier in May, we had a concert at Petco Park where a musician named Elton John agreed to play a private concert to help raise money for cancer research. Going into the night, we thought we'd have about 16,000 people there or so, but what you can see here is an image that was taken behind me on stage. There were actually 27,000 people there that night. And in this moment, I had just shared a little bit about my family's journey with cancer. And I talked about how my mother-in-law had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And shortly, a little bit after that, we had our 3rd kid. And her condition was kind of rapidly declining. She lived in the Midwest, and her last wish at the end was to hold her brand new grandbaby. So my husband and I rushed to the Midwest, and on stage right before this moment, you saw a photo of her holding this little 3-month-old baby. And so I said that just before, she lost her life to cancer, she got to hold this brand new infant. And I said, if you have been touched by cancer, would you please stand with me and hold up your light, and you can see what happened here. At the time, a couple of years before that, we would have thought that this was impossible. We raised $11.5 million from that concert alone. We actually had one person who was there that night, unasked, gave us $1 million. Pretty incredible. So our mission at Curebound is to mobilize San Diego to accelerate cures for cancer in our lifetime. And you can see that that's exactly what's happening there that evening. Another way that we mobilize San Diego is through an event that used to be called Padres Pedal the Cause. Now it's called the Curebound Cancer Challenge. You can see this is the finish line of our 5K at Petco Park. This is Joseph and Cindy Pangelinen. And what you might not guess from looking at Joseph is that he was actually also battling stage 4 lung cancer. And if you talk to Joseph, who's still battling now, almost 5 years into his journey, he describes going through cancer as being on a sequence of lily pads, because he knows that one current therapy is going to work for a little while, and then the cancer is going to mutate and grow, and it's not going to work anymore, so he's got to try a new therapy. And that jump to the next lily pad is terrifying. And so he and Cindy come to participate in the Curebound Cancer Challenge and everything we do because he believes that every dollar he raises is going into research in this community that's giving him a chance to beat his dream, which is to overcome cancer. What makes Curebound unique, in one simple word, is collaboration. At the core of what we do from a research perspective is build connections across this incredible research community and forge collaborations that really otherwise wouldn't exist. And this is an image from November 2021. We were launching our scientific advisory board. If you look closely, you can see the 6 research institutions that we partner with here. Morris Cancer Center at UC San Diego, Rady Children's Hospital, the Salk Institute, Sanford Burnham Prebys, Scripps Research, and La Jolla Institute. And they're all smiling, happy together here in one photo as we launch our scientific advisory board. I think you can talk to any of these people here, other people that work in industry, and know that this doesn't happen in other communities. This spirit and willingness to actually come together and work together across institutions is really unique, and that's what we think is our advantage with Curebound. So every dollar that we raise, we put into our collaborative research model, and so those grants are scored by peer reviewers. They come up to this committee that you see here that's not only comprised of leaders of the 6 academic institutions, but also leaders from life science, from biotech companies, from venture capital, people who have actually identified early phase discoveries that have been translated to clinical stages and become commercial medicines. And so that is really what differentiates Curebound. We launched our scientific advisory board in 2021. And a year later, this was a celebration to thank our donors and to award our first ever Curebound research grants. And what you see here is a young woman named Aubrey, and she's up at the podium announcing our first Cure Prize. And a Cure Prize for us is our biggest award. It's $1 million prize that goes to a team that has an innovation to improve the standard of care of a cancer that's typically fatal, and to have patient application in 3 to 5 years. And so Aubrey is up there and she's announcing our first Cure Prize, which is an MRI screening tool to detect ovarian cancer at earlier stages. And what you see in the background is actually a photo of her mom and dad at Padres Pedal the Cause. And her mom has short hair because of the side effects she's overcoming from her own battle with ovarian cancer. She was actually on a feeding tube at this moment that Aubrey was announcing this Cure Prize for ovarian cancer. And so you knew that her dream was not only to help her mother, but also other people who are facing ovarian cancer and try and detect the disease earlier and lead better outcomes. At a wealth conference, I thought I'd be kind of silly if I just talked about photos and didn't have any numbers if I wanted to be invited back. So wealth with intention, I'm going to look here a little bit at our annual revenue. So our organization started actually in 2013, just before this year when we started giving out money to scientific research teams. But for our first years, up until 2020, we raised all of our money through a cycling event. And you can sort of see incremental growth, about 2.2 to 3, and also this is not billions, unfortunately, we're talking $1 million here. But what you see in 2020 is the year we didn't have an event, and we assembled that scientific advisory board. We created a strategy to really transform the organization and to increase how we engage the community and also how we invest in cancer research. So you can see here for 2 years in a row, we actually doubled our revenue. The growth here you can see sort of is banded. The concert for cures now we've done 3 times, and that's raised about $20 million. It's engaged 27,000 people at our last concert, so it just kind of dwarfs what we were doing before. Our other events prior to that were about 5,000 people. We also raised money through the Cancer Challenge, and then we started something called the Founders Circle when we launched Curebound as well, which was really led by one of our board members. And someone asked him if he would consider giving, his daughter had gone through breast cancer, and they said, would you consider giving a gift of $100,000, which at the time would have been an enormous gift for our organization. And he said, I'm not going to give $100,000 because that's not going to do anything for cancer. But I'll give $1 million if other people will do that with me. So in 2021, we had about 6 people commit to $1 million. We didn't even have pledge forms at the time. So when we think about wealth with intention, we're fundraising with people at the highest levels and also micro-level donations, everything across this entire community. But this Founders Circle campaign has allowed us to raise about $25 million to pour directly into our collaborative cancer research model. So it's been pretty exciting. One of the questions that David asked me backstage was, who's going to perform at next year's concert? I said it was going to be Dick, but he didn't like that. So I don't know who it's going to be yet, but we'll have someone good. So we've raised, our trajectory of fundraising has gone up. Meanwhile, we've built the infrastructure internally to deploy our scientific advisory board and to really fund the most innovative research projects here in San Diego. Just in the last 3 years, we've funded about $23 million. That's invested in 60 different collaborative teams. We have these discovery grants, which are early phase, sort of high risk, high reward projects that are $250,000. It's a grant, and it requires collaboration across any of our 2 institutes. We also fund targeted grants, which are closer preclinical or early clinical stages for about $500,000. And then we also have funded those Cure Prizes, which I mentioned, funding a pancreatic team, a liver team, and an ovarian cancer team. So as you can see, as we've kind of scaled the community events, we've also scaled our growth in cancer research and these investments. We currently, our scientific advisory board is reviewing applications right now, and we'll meet in a month to decide how many teams get funding this year. We've budgeted about $10 million. You can imagine that in this day and age with funding cuts and policy changes at NIH, the number of applications this year has gone up by 33%. So there is truly really high demand for this research, and this is a chance where we try and fund high-risk, kind of high-reward projects early phase and give scientists a chance to try something that they otherwise might not. So this is really what we cover from a research perspective. And I think just want to kind of wrap up here at the end with telling a little story about this young woman, Savvy. She was diagnosed with medulloblastoma when she was about 2.5 years old. She was waking up from naps and she was throwing up, and her parents thought maybe she had the flu. And they took her to Rady Children's Hospital, and they learned pretty quickly that it wasn't the flu, that she had tumors up and down her spine and in her brain, and she was in for surgery the next day. And her family got the news pretty soon that they were not even sure she would make her third birthday. Around that time, both of her parents actually worked at WD-40, and we had a team that participated in Padres Pedal the Cause, and so they joined and they started fundraising, and the company got behind them, their neighborhood got behind them, and she actually was in a pilot trial that we funded. It was a collaboration between Sanford Burnham Prebys and the surgeon at Rady Children's Hospital, who would take the tissue samples out of her tumors that were removed, and they would actually try different things in petri dishes. Anything that was approved to treat pediatric cancer, they would try and see actually what would work. So you can see her now. I said she was diagnosed when she was 2.5, and they didn't know if she was going to make it. That's at the Cancer Challenge this year. She's 9 years old. She's a soccer player. She's a runner. She's a multi-sport athlete. And she's doing great because of the community in San Diego, of the research quality in this community, the willingness for institutions to collaborate, the support of people like you that fund organizations like us and allow us to bring together the community in advanced research. So my hope is that in 40 years, like, we're not talking about cancer like this. In 40 years with artificial intelligence, my hope is that no one's getting stage 4 diagnoses, that if you are getting diagnosed with cancer, it's well earlier. You know what your risk profile is. We're catching it early. There's operations that can remove cancer. Maybe there are some that you have to have chronic treatment, but I really think that looking forward with artificial intelligence and with intentional wealth, we can change how we experience cancer. So with that, I will say thank you to AlphaCore for having me today and for being incredible sponsors of Curebound, and thank you for taking time to learn about what we do.
And that was incredible, and I know it hits home for a lot of us here in the room, so I just want to say thank you. Can we give another round of applause to Anne? My name's Troy Owens. I'm a wealth advisor here at AlphaCore, and I'm thrilled to join Anne on stage to ask her some more questions about the impactful work that they're doing at Curebound to advance cancer research. So Anne, let's sit down. I want to start out at a high level and talk a little bit about how Curebound prioritizes funding different parts of cancer research, because I know there's prevention and early detection and treatments. So how do you guys think about where you put dollars and prioritize those different fundings?
Yeah. So we have a team of about 20 people now, and we don't have labs. We're not hiring scientists to work for Curebound. Our value proposition, as I talked about, is about forging these collaborations across the community and not dictating areas of specific disease types that we think should be funded, but we have intentionally built this like a broad research strategy and a scientific advisory board that can kind of guide that. When we stood up the SAB in 2021, we also identified sort of 5 research pillars. And so we invest grants across that, from prevention and diagnostic tools, novel therapeutics and new therapeutic approaches, immunotherapies and personalized vaccines, childhood cancers, and then overcoming disparities in research and care. So those 3 grant types that I mentioned, being the discovery grant, the targeted grants, and the cure prizes, we invest across those 5 pillars. And then it's so that the topics are really generated by scientists in the field. They apply, to us, and then we go through a pretty rigorous peer review process, so that each application is being reviewed by scientists who actually know that cancer type and understand the mechanism and can give us good direction around whether it's a good investment.
That's great insight. And obviously the main theme across all panels today is AI. I think if we had a jar on stage, which was a swear jar, but it was an AI jar, you had to put $1 in the bucket, it'd be getting pretty full. But I do have to ask, where do you think AI is going in cancer research, and how do you think it can further advance what you are doing to move the cause further?
So, I mean, there's no question that it's going to have a huge impact, and I think you kind of have to break it down. I mean, cancer is, obviously, it's not one disease, it's 200 or more different types of cancers. Many of them are detected, some of them can be detected early, some of them, we routinely are not detected till later stage disease. So when I think about AI, I think there's some application to sort of basic discovery and making analysis of enormous data systems go faster, trying to identify different new biomarkers and speeding up the early phase kind of basic discovery process. I think there's also room for clinical application, even in terms of things of like matching patients with opportunities for clinical trials. If you know anyone who's looked for a clinical trial and they're not in the sort of healthcare or medical research space, it can be completely overwhelming. I once heard someone say, go look at nih.gov. Don't do that. Find a friend that understands cancer and can help you, but I do think AI can help identify people that are waiting, hoping for a clinical trial and actually get them in, which only, of course, increases the pace by which hopefully these clinical trials are actually being approved. I think there's a huge opportunity in terms of better understanding tumors and mutations and hopefully driving more sort of like personalized targeted medicine.
Yeah, and in your speech, you talked a lot about the power community, which is the intersection between the philanthropic and business communities. Can you talk a little bit more about how important that support is to finding cures for cancer?
So our organization started in St. Louis, where our founders, Amy and Bill Komen, started Pedal the Cause. Bill had gone through lymphoma a couple times, and they wanted to give back to the community. And so he had to go through a stem cell transplant, and was like in the hospital for over a month. They had 3 young girls, and they had all these like friends would come and bring dinners and take the kids to do things and help Amy, and they kind of became Bill's angels. And they saw in that moment just one family. If you open up when you're vulnerable and allow people to help you, then you can do, survive things that maybe you didn't think you could. And so that has kind of like, we've seen that over and over and over again. We started as a cycling event, like I mentioned. Everyone who registers for the event has a profile page, and you tell your story of how you've been touched by cancer and what motivates you. So I think the community aspect is like absolutely critical for us. Even that concept that I talked about, that board member who didn't want to give $100,000 but would give $1 million. I mean, he was like, this has to be a community movement and I'll be the leader on it, but I want other people to come with me. I should say that we've now had 50 families join the Founders Circle. So it really is way more about building community. That's why our mission is mobilize all of San Diego. It's not just about one individual check.
Yeah, and as wealth advisors, we talk to our clients all the time about setting up different types of charitable giving vehicles and donor-advised funds and how to be intentional about their gifting. Are you guys working directly with donors to gift smarter, and what are opportune gifting strategies to make their dollar go further for these amazing firms that are furthering cancer research?
Yeah, so we partner with businesses and with individuals and family offices in a number of different ways. We have been fortunate to have many donors, commit a multi-year gift, and so for the first time we had sustainability, kind of like predictable annual income. In the Pedal years, it was always like we raised as much money as we could, and then we wrote the check, and then we started at 0 every year, and that's fun when you're young, but multi-year gifts are great. We do legacy giving. We receive stock transfers. We take one-time donations. We certainly partner with people to maximize their donor-advised funds. I know there are some incentives this year to possibly people giving a little bit earlier and avoiding some things that are coming down the road.
I think I saw on the website you guys allow Bitcoin donations. So if anyone has Bitcoin.
Don't ask me what that means. Yeah. Yes.
Well, I appreciate your time, and that's all the questions we have, but we'd love to open it up to the audience if anyone has questions. All right. One in the middle.
Thanks so much, Anne, for all you're doing. I was just curious, being a financial advisor, about your financials. So you brought in $22 million in 24 and donated $13 million in grants, and obviously you're building some wealth for the future. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so we did have those sort of like unprecedented 2 years of major fundraising. It was about close to $9 million in 2021, and then we set up the concert in 2022. We raised about 21 million that year. Some of that was, like I said, multi-year gifts, so we weren't receiving all of the cash at the same time. But in the earlier years before we launched Curebound, we used to we had super transactional fundraising and research. So we used to write the check to the 4 cancer centers before we brought in Scripps Research and La Jolla Institute. So we basically used to outsource the grant making. In 2021, we brought that in-house. And we turned from like giving a gift to the institutions and sort of giving some guide rails around what we wanted them to do with it. And we built the infrastructure internally. So that's why one of the years it was only about $3 million that we invested, because we were still building the peer review process, and some of the grants in review didn't go out to the following year, which is I think why it jumped to about $11.5 million. So we're still finding equilibrium for like what's kind of going to come in annually, and then sort of the volume of research application. So I think you point out we don't want to sit on a lot of cash. We don't have an endowment. It is nice to have multi-year gifts and to have something in the bank that we can make smart investments. Elton John did not play for free, but we want to maximize how much we're giving to cancer research every year. And now I have the confidence, having gone through the grant cycle and managed that internally 3 years in a row, that we're getting applications of all different types of cancer. The demand is going up. There is incredible research that we can deploy funding to, and so the goal is to do that more and more. I will add one thing is that I didn't mention that we also launched a new grant program last year called the Catalyst Program. For the first time ever, we're funding early phase companies that are pre-Series A, ideally like as they're just kind of spinning out and starting up, but that's kind of a new exciting thing that we're doing to try to de-risk these companies, give them some support, and hope that venture capital will come in and give support. Hopefully I answered your question.
Any other questions for Anne up in the balcony?
First, I am so amazed at what you have done, so thank you for that, especially in this crazy time. It's amazing.
Thank you.
And also, I did want to ask, in this crazy time, you mentioned that you're really stepping in to take the place of some big funding investment laws. How do you envision the future of cancer research? What does that look like?
I'm an optimist. I think we're going to get through this time right now. I think our funding right now is more important than ever, absolutely. I think for, one of the metrics that we typically look at is like for the teams that we fund, what kind of follow-on funding that are they able to go and get primarily from the NIH? And so we're going to have to think about if that's like the right metric. I have plenty of teams that I've talked to that actually really incredible scientists. One of them that comes to mind, Tony Hunter, who's been at the Salk Institute for 50 years. One of his grants that had been approved and was in motion had just been like overnight stopped. And that's pretty scary. He's a senior scientist who's had so many incredible researchers, and there's no plan for that, to be able to transfer that and nurture the younger kind of up-and-coming scientists. Talking about that pool, up-and-coming scientists, it's hard for them, I think, also to get those sort of like early phase starter funds as well. So I do think that our philanthropic support is really critical, and I think that it's exciting that at least we partner with the institutions on our scientific advisory board so they can help guide us around where will our philanthropic impact have the most value. I think the other thing that we've just been doing over the last year is a strategic planning session for our SAB to look at each of our 5 research pillars. We've assembled teams that are experts in each of those areas to say, like, what impact have we had already and what impact can we have in this space? So our fundraising is even more outcome-based. And I've had a couple conversations with really generous philanthropists that are considering like major gifts to support each of those research pillars. So I'm optimistic that we can raise significantly more funding and we can infuse, what we need to. I think $200,000 here and there for labs can make a big deal, especially over the next couple of years, and then hopefully the landscape looks a little bit different.
Is there a project that you're particularly excited about that you can tell us a little bit about?
Yes, a couple come to mind, but one of the Catalyst teams, which is that sort of like pre-Series A company, when we select the winners, like through our scientific advisory process, I don't just like send them an email. I usually say like, we're almost done with the review, I have a couple questions, would you jump on a call? And then I tell them, congrats, you've actually been selected. And we do that so we can see their reaction and we can understand, like, how did this collaboration come to be? What's your background? What are you really trying to do in this research project? And so it's a lot of calls in November, but it's very fun. And a Catalyst team, when we told them that we were funding them, they actually started crying. And she was like, this is a Harvard and MIT trained neurosurgeon who's been practicing here in San Diego for a couple decades. She's never had a company before. And she made some early discoveries around macrophages in like 2016. And it was published in big journals. And they got emotional on the call because we were giving them a $250,000 grant for their glioblastoma project. And she said, we're getting so much funding from the NIH on our sarcoma project, but no one will fund our glioblastoma program. And I was like, it's hard to describe how impactful that is. That's exactly what we want to do. We're not giving her $5 million. We're giving her $250,000 to try, a solution on a disease that's like so devastating. So that one comes to mind. They've since come to our staff meeting, and she's talked about how the research has progressed. They're getting good findings, and I think that one's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, this is Anne's first time at our summit, so I just want to say on behalf of the AlphaCore, thank you so much for coming back again. And so let's give a round of applause for Anne.